Hello and welcome to the Manfred Olsen Planetarium virtual series of programs. Today, it is my pleasure to welcome Antonio Alves, who is an astronomer. He is from Chile, although today he's talking to us from Brazil. He is, as I said, an astronomer, and he is a manager of, first of all, he's employed by the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, and he is a manager at the ALMA Observatory. And he today is going to talk to us about the connections between Chilean culture and astronomy. And we're very happy to have you again with us, Antonio. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Jean. I would like to thank the Manfred Olsen Planetarium at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, to Jean and to Victoria for this opportunity to share our views of the Chilean skies and the music that have inspired us. So let me see if I can share my screen, make sure everything's set up right, and let's get started. So with this beautiful view of the southern skies, with the cacti from the desert, I would like to open this conversation about the connection between Chilean skies, Chilean music, and Chilean culture. We are starting with the music from Inti Illimani. It's a group that in the 70s started to recover the heritage from Andean music while they were in exile in Italy, and they became world known, and eventually they managed to come back after 1990 when the dictatorship was over. So what makes Chile so special? Well, just take a look at it. Right? This is a view of Chile seen from space, and what strikes immediately the eye is that there are virtually no clouds above the land. So this is really what characterizes the north of Chile, which is where the Atacama Desert is located. It is where most of the telescopes that we have in Chile are also located. Chile is a very long country. It spans over 5,000 miles, I think, from the north to the very bottom, going from the desert in the north to the green valleys where the pisco and the wines are made, to the south of Chile where we have volcanoes and this familiar landscape of volcanoes and lake together, glaciers, and to the very bottom of Chile where we find the Patagonia. And it's very famous for the Torre del Paine National Park, which is what you see at the bottom, which has some sort of resemblance with the Tetons, close to where you are. But what is really interesting and what we're going to be discussing today is the connection with the north, right, with the desert. And why is this desert so special? Well, one of the things that makes the Atacama Desert special is that it is the driest desert on Earth. And when you are there, you can find some days where the humidity in there is 2% or 5%. That is terrible for humans. The minute I step off the bus on those days, my lips immediately get dry, my throat gets sore. It's really hard to sleep, but I know it's going to be a fantastic week for observations. Because it's not only the clouds that hampers our sight of the skies, it's actually the little droplets of water that are hanging in the air that absorb, diffract, that means change the direction, and retard the light that is coming from space. So for us astronomers, light is our only tool to learn from what's going on out there. Water vapor is a real hurdle that we have to overcome. And coming to dry places like this, where the humidity is so low, is the way to go. The other characteristic of these sort of landscapes that we find near San Pedro de Atacama very close to the Bolivian border, is that we're very high. We have high plateaus. And that's another very beneficial aspect for astronomy, because we may want to think of the atmosphere as another sea. It's a sea of gas. We are submerged in that sea of air. So that sea of air has water, but it has also other molecules that also affect the light that we want to study. So going to the very, very high places, we are reducing the thickness of the atmosphere that the light from the stars has to go through. So going to very high places and bright places is really key for astronomy. And from what you can see in this diagram, the ALMA observatory is already the highest observatory on Earth, followed by the Keck Observatory that are located in Mauna Kea volcano in Hawaii, in the Big Island, and there are other observatories. But really, ALMA is the highest observatory in the world right now, and it's actually the second highest technical building on Earth, superseded only by a train station in Tibet. Of course, Chile is not the only place that is good for astronomy, and we cannot only rely on one place, because two hemispheres, the northern and southern hemisphere, and we need to have telescopes in both hemispheres in order to be able to map the entire sky. So that's why observatories in the Canary Islands, in La Palma, where there is actually a volcanic eruption going on right now, South Africa. It's telling me my internet connection is unstable. I hope it's still going on. Of course, we have many telescopes located throughout the United States, mostly in Arizona and New Mexico, where we have nice deserts, and as I just mentioned, in Hawaii. Really, most of the telescopes, and in the next coming years, the best telescopes are going to be concentrated in northern Chile and in the Big Island of Hawaii. The Chilean skies are so special that there is actually a motion at UNESCO and at the United Nations to make the Chilean skies become a world sanctuary for humanity. And well, how does it look like? Well, this is what it looks like when you are at night. There's actually the moon in this image at the bottom, but still with the moon we can see this amazing sky. And in this case, what really strikes our eye is the Milky Way, which is what we see going across this image. What is the Milky Way? Well, I think most of us know that the Milky Way is our home galaxy where we live. It should look like something like this, right? If we were able to move away from the plane of the Milky Way and have this bird's eye view. But of course, we don't have the technology to do this. So this is an artist's impression of what the Milky Way looks like. And with the dot we were seeing there is the location of our solar system. So we're located in an outer spiral arm, but we're located in the very, very plane of the Milky Way. So actually, we're seeing it sideways, right? This is why it looks like this. And it's not really straightforward. I mean, I've spent a lot of time looking at the sky, and I was wondering how did we make this picture of the Milky Way looking it like from this, right? And the explanation that I try to give is like, well, actually it's not that easy, because being submerged in the plane of the Milky Way is like being a pepperoni inside a pepperoni pizza, right? Always a pepperoni in this pizza. It would be really hard for me to figure out that I am a pepperoni inside a pepperoni pizza, right? Because everything I see on the sides is cheese. Maybe I'll see the edge of a pepperoni. I won't be able to see nothing if I look down, and I will see, well, the air if I look up. So it's pretty much our reality. But we have made a lot of studies. But this is not coming from one generation. There's been at least centuries of studies of modern astronomy, and we have come to the conclusion that yes, we are inside a spiral galaxy that we call the Milky Way, and because we are located in it, in the plane of it, this is how it looks like, okay? And this is really how it looks like if we were able to take a picture from it from the northern and stitching it out with an image from the southern hemisphere, we'll get the full span of the Milky Way. In the center of the image is the center of the Milky Way. We cannot see the other side of the Milky Way because the center has so many stars. And yeah, I mean, you can see that the center is thicker, so that's what we call the bulge of the Milky Way, and then it sort of spreads out to the sides. And what you see at the bottom right, there are two bright, sort of cloudy, diffuse objects. I don't know why my cursor is not working, so I'm going to have to deal with this. But I think you can see what I'm referring to. It's below the plane of the Milky Way. On the right, there is these two fuzzy objects. And what these objects are actually satellite galaxies. Those are two tiny galaxies that orbit the Milky Way. They are called the Magellanic Clouds because they were discovered by the Portuguese sailor Magellan when he was doing the first trip around the world. He was going south of Chile, actually, in the Magellan Strait, named after him. And he saw these clouds every night. And at the beginning, he thought these were clouds, but then they were always in the same position in the sky, despite of the weather. So he realized that they were actually astronomical objects. But it wasn't until this century when we realized these are actually galaxies that we can study. This is a close-up to one of the two galaxies. These are irregular galaxies. This is why they don't look nice and spiral or elliptical. But there is a lot going on. You can see we have identified many regions of star formation that are of our interest. But let's go back to our story of the Chilean landscape and the Chilean culture and the Chilean skies. This is a map of Chile. You can see it's very different. You can see that the north is all very brown because it's very dry and the south gets greener. And on the right, we have a close-up. Santiago is the capital that you can see at the bottom. And really, there are two poles for astronomy. One is La Serena, and the other one is Antofagasta, where most of the newer telescopes are located. But really, things got started in La Serena in the 50s, when American astronomers and European astronomers identified this place as a fantastic place for astronomy. And they built the first generation of telescopes there, which we're going to discuss right now. The first one was actually this one, Cerro Tololo Observatory. It's a North American owned telescope that operated, and that was in the 70s and the 80s one of the best telescopes in the world. The big dome is a 4-meter telescope from which many discoveries have occurred. This is another image of the southern sky of the Blanco 4-meter telescope. On the left, you can see the two Magellan Clouds. On the right, the Milky Way. And actually, the 2011 Nobel Prize came from discoveries made thanks to the Blanco telescope. It is these astronomers that were laureated with the Nobel Prize thanks to the discovery of the acceleration of the universe, which is something you may have heard. And this was made thanks to observations from the Blanco telescope and a special calibration technique that was developed by a Chilean astronomer, Mauro Amui, who was not a member of the Nobel Prize group, but he has been acknowledged for his crucial contribution to this. The song we're listening now is called Singing the Song of the Stars. It's again in Tillimani, and it's actually a tribute to Victor Jara, the person who we're listening before. Victor Jara was a popular singer and songwriter that was very famous during the epoch of Salvador Allende, because, well, he was singing what the people wanted to hear, beautiful songs of inspiration, but he was detained during the dictatorship in the first weeks of the dictatorship, and he was killed, having his hands brutally destroyed before he was killed. So he's become really an inspiration throughout the world, And this song is a song to dedicate his well, his status of martyr at this moment. Again, in the La Serena region, close to Santiago, it's another telescope. This one is called Las Campanas Observatory because it's located in Cerro Las Campanas, the Las Campanas Hill. There are several telescopes here, and those are also owned by a consortium of North American universities. And I'm going to go quickly through some discoveries that have stemmed from these observatories. Before, we're going to show you this image of the twin 6.5 meter diameter telescopes, Magellan telescopes, actually. Just realizing that Magellan is everywhere here. We have the Magellanic Clouds in between the two, and these are the two Magellan telescopes that are actually quite cutting-edge technology. And one of the super interesting discoveries that occurred in this observatory is the discovery of this young planet-forming disk. The discovery image taken in 1984 is the one on the left. It's actually a photographic plate. And what we see on the sides is a disk. The problem, like the image at the bottom center illustrates. Okay, it's a disk the size of a solar system, but since we're seeing it sideways, it looks like a diamond. It's actually a disk. It was the first planet-forming disk that was ever discovered. So it's actually opened an entire field that we're dedicated now to understand how planets form and how life can emerge on these planets. So at the bottom left, you have a super high-resolution image made with the top observatories we have right now, but that confirmed the discovery image. And in the top right, the dot that you see, not the black dot is a mask that we use to obscure the star because the star is very bright so that we can detect planets. And when you see the orange dot at the bottom right is actually a planet in this system. So it's not planet forming, it already formed planets. And this is something that is really 2020 observations in an article that was published in 2020. This beautiful song is like a lullaby. It's called El Cielito de mi pieza, or The Little Sky in My Room. And what the guy is telling is about how he can see and dream about the stars and the sky in the ceiling of his room. And with this lullaby, we're gonna talk about La Silla Observatory, which is the last important telescope that we have in the La Serena region. This is La Silla Observatory that is owned by the European Southern Observatory, which is a consortium of European governments that established this as the first observatory in the south, from owned by Europe. And you can see it's pretty crowded in terms of instruments and telescopes. And again, this is the house of quite amazing discoveries. Actually, another Nobel Prize. These two guys, these two Swiss astronomers, Didier Queloz on the left and his PhD advisor, Michel Mayor, from the Geneva Observatory, they used one of these telescopes in La Silla to develop a technique that allowed them to discover the first planet orbiting another star. And this is why these two astronomers were awarded with the 2019 Nobel Prize in Physics. The technique they developed, is that what they tell you that all the planets turn around the sun is actually not true. All the planets and the sun orbit around the center of mass of the solar system, right? Which is a position, is a place where you average the masses and the distance from the center of the system. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is, as you can see in the cartoon on the bottom left, when Jupiter, which is the most massive planet, turns around the center of mass, it pulls the sun. right? And by pulling it, if somebody was in another star and were looking at our sun, he would see our sun wobble a little bit, but it would wobble. And what these two astronomers did is that developed the technique to measure that wobble in other stars. And with that technique, they managed to discover the very first planet around the star. And now there are thousands of other solar system analogs discovered around other stars. Actually, today, we believe that all stars have planets. And this is something that we have been able to conclude through the pioneering works of Mayer and Kelos, and also now to several other instruments and several other techniques that are devoted to discovering planets, and hopefully Earth-like planets. This is another view of the La Silla Observatory, with an antenna on the left that's a precursor to the ALMA Observatory. And of course, you can see the Magellanic Clouds on the left and the disk of the Milky Way. Oh, I forgot. There's still another telescope in the region. This is the Gemini telescope, which is it's owned by a consortium of governments. And this one is a telescope that is specially made for observing the near infrared. But it's enough from the La Serena region. I think we should move up. Another 1,000 miles north from La Serena is where the Antofagasta region is where the biggest open cut copper mine is, which is where Chile gets most of its salary. The main export of Chile is actually copper, and it happens there. So it's a place that was known forever for mining, and now it's becoming also known for astronomy. And inland from Antofagasta, and a few kilometers inland from Calama, we find the town of San Pedro de Atacama. But in Antofagasta, very close to the sea, is where you see this beautiful four-eyed beast, which is the very large telescope built and owned by ISO, the European Southern Observatory. What you're seeing here are 4 8-meter telescopes. These are mirrors, optical telescopes, that each of them are just amazing because they are 8 meters. It's a large collecting area by itself. But actually, what you see in this drawing is that the light from each of the telescopes can be combined by these delay lines that you see in white in the bottom. These are actually underground delay lines with mirrors that can move so that they can actually combine the light from the 4 telescopes and make it more powerful, because 4 eyes are better. This, you never get bored of taking photos of this. It's just so photogenic, it's just so beautiful. Imagine, look at this one taken during a meteor shower. A few events were captured in this photo. This observatory was actually in one of the last James Bond movies. That's where they make an explosion and everything goes up at the end, but it's quite amazing place to be. And it's not only beautiful, it's super powerful. And we can make, with these telescopes, we have made images of extrasolar systems. This again is a system that we're seeing from above, and the star, it's at the center. We've masked it so that we can detect the planets that are orbiting the star. And those are dubbed here B, D, E, and C. 4 planets around this star. It was discovered in 2019, but since 2019, we have continued to monitor the system. We have actually managed to see these planets move throughout the years. So isn't this amazing? And not only that, with these instruments, we are also able to study the composition of these planets, because we can tell what the planets are made of by studying the light, actually by studying the composition of light, just like this rainbow shows. That picture of a rainbow, I took it when I was in the south of Chile in a very rainy place. And actually, the rainbow is an imprint of the chemical composition of the sun. So by studying the light, of these exoplanets, we can study their composition and tell, for instance, whether they have water, whether they have carbon monoxide, whether they have ozone. And in this same area, it's now under construction. This huge monster, you can see the scale with the cars that are at the bottom left. This is a 39-meter telescope. It's actually a segmented telescope. You can see that the mirror is actually made of several hexagons that are going to be put together to make this huge 39-meter telescope, again owned by ISO, whose main purpose is to be able to study the chemical composition of the extrasolar planets. This is really what's coming in the next decade or decades or so. We're going to find out a lot about what these extrasolar planets are made of. So far, well, why? Well, because we're all wondering whether there is life elsewhere or not. I think everybody wants to find out. And we scientists were trying to tackle the question from the scientific point of view. So what we're doing is basically trying to discover new extrasolar planets and see which ones could be potentially habitable. What does potentially habitable means? Well, it means that it can host liquid water or not. Right? We can infer that by knowing the properties of the star and how much it shines into the planet. So there is a distance that is really the sweet spot for each star, where if a planet is located, it can be habitable. And we're also looking for planets located in the habitable region, but also that are similar to Earth. That means not giant gaseous planets. And you can see so far, we have detected of the order of 60 sort of Earth-like planets that could be potentially habitable. And this number is growing by the minute, because we are putting every day new telescopes and doing new surveys in order to gain more statistics. And now, moving inland from Antofagasta to San Pedro de Atacama, the oasis town of San Pedro de Atacama, you actually need to take this road to get there. You really need to cross a desert. This really gives you an idea of what I'm talking about when I say that it's dry. It's really dry. But when you arrive to San Pedro de Atacama, you're in for a treat, because it is an oasis that has actually been the longest continuously inhabited place on South America. This is a place that, well, there was an oasis because there is a river that just burst from the middle of nowhere. Actually, it comes out from a volcano and makes this place habitable and grows stuff and drink water. And it's actually a place where several indigenous cultures used to converge: the Incas culture, the native Diaguitas, Peruvian indigenous. So that's why it has been continuously inhabited for more than 6,000 years. And this place is actually a very big touristic destination. You can see the streets in the middle are always busy throughout the years with foreigners and Chilean people that want to see these landscapes. So because you have this rich rich geographical formations, salt lakes where you see these pink flamingos, geysers, altiplanic salt lakes, altiplanic lagoons. So I really recommend that if you are thinking about taking the trip down here, you consider visiting San Pedro de Atacama. And about 30 miles from San Pedro de Atacama is where the ALMA array is located. It's hard to see here, but you can see the antennas located there at the middle, before the mountains. This is actually the Chagnantor Plateau. Chagnantor in Kunsa language, which is the language of the native Indians that were living there, means takeoff place or observation place. It's not clear, but it's clear that there is a link to the skies. So it's actually a very nice coincidence that we decided to build the best telescope we've built so far in this place that was already singled out as a place with a strong connection to the universe. This is what we look like, our little baby, or the beast. It's an array of 50 12-meter antennas. That's what ALMA means Atacama Large Millimeter to Millimeter Array. Atacama is because it's located in Atacama, large because it's huge, it's 50 antennas, there's nothing like that in the world. Millimeter to millimeter refers to the frequency that where it operates, or the wavelength where it operates, which is the millimeter to millimeter region of the electromagnetic spectrum. An array because it's an array. An array means that these antennas are combined so that they all work as a single telescope. And you can see, of course, the two Magellanic clouds on above them. The antennas are located at 5,000 meters, as I mentioned earlier, but our base camp is at 3,000 meters. The volcanoes you can see at the bottom are already Bolivian, so we're really at the border. And this is the main camp where we sleep. There are also some labs where we refurbish instrumentation. The control room is there. I don't go to 5,000 meters unless I have a visitor. Normally I just work in the main building at the center there. That's where we're controlling the antenna. And actually, since January this year, because of the pandemic, we brought forward a project that we had already going on. We accelerated it, of operating from Santiago. So actually, since January, there are no astronomers on site, only technicians and engineers that are crucial for the operations. But we are working from Santiago, from 2,000 kilometers from there. And actually, so far, so good. I'm going to share with you some things we see. This is the view from my office over there. It's absolutely breathtaking. It's actually a bit blurry because there is a sandstorm at the moment, but otherwise you can see up to 2,000 miles across the salt flats. Driest place on Earth? Yes, sometimes, but sometimes there are these thunderstorms that come from Bolivia. This is actually between December and February, which is the rain season in the Amazon, right? So sometimes the monsoon season is so strong that some of these clouds can penetrate the Andes mountains, and reach us. And you can see this sort of views. It's actually quite impressive. But they only last for a few weeks, and the rest of the year it is, as I described earlier, an excellent place for astronomy. When it rains, it pours, and it actually fills these peaks that otherwise look like they hadn't been touched by a drop of water for thousands of years. But actually, I've been taking baths in those. They form little waterfalls. They're really nice. All right. This is another view from the telescope, seen from with a drone that can fly actually that high where the air is so thin. This is the view I have as my background. I love this image of the antennas in silhouette. This is the most photogenic of the telescopes, I believe. This is one is taken during nighttime. It's the moon that is shining in the back. It's actually right in the plane of the Milky Way, so that's why we don't see so much of the Milky Way. And we are not alone. There's quite a few beasts living around. This is a fox that we're not supposed to feed, but it's actually quite domesticated after 10 years. There are alpacas, there are llamas, macos, and this is what the array looked like a few weeks ago when we were hit by one of the snowstorms. So after 10 years of operating, I can say that our staff is getting quite good at cleaning up the snow and recovering the array. Because actually, just after the snow is the best time for observing, because all the water vapor is frozen. So we can get the best transparency ever. And if you want to find out more about what working there looks like, I will recommend you that you follow this guy, Pablo Carrillo. He's one of our engineers on site. He's been there for a long time. He loves his work. He loves the place he works. And that is reflected in the quality of the photos that he posts. So I strongly recommend that you add him to your Instagram account. And for what? really. For what do we do all this? Well, I'll tell you a few things. We want to find out everything about the world and about the universe. And one of the big discoveries I can share with you is something that went to the news about 2 years ago, is this first image of a black hole that was made with ALMA and of telescopes around the world, right? This is the first image ever since Einstein in the 1900s, early 1900s, postulated the existence of these objects. So this was a nice demonstration of a comparison between a technology, between a theory and observations. And actually, it's not that different from what they thought it would look like in Interstellar, the movie, which, if you ask me, it's a pretty good movie because it does have a lot of scientific facts. Remember, they go to other planets that we thought could be habitable. They went to 3 of them, and they all had water, but they didn't have the conditions that they expected. So it's actually a pretty good, scientifically valid movie until the end, when they, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie, but at the end they go through a black hole, and that's just impossible, at least with our knowledge of physics. Any object would be completely torn apart by the gravity of the black hole. But going back to the actual science, this on the top is how we thought a black hole should look like in theory. The top is an artist illustration. The bottom left is actually a mathematical model, computational model created by putting the physics and see what comes out of that. What you see actually in orange is the material falling into the black hole, because the black hole by itself, it's black, right? And on the right, you have the image, which actually allows to measure the size of the black hole. And that, just measuring the size of a black hole, is like a revolution. It's like Christmas for people that study black holes, because they hadn't measured one since the theory first came out. And how was this possible? Well, it was actually not just ALMA. You can see us at the middle, that's ALMA. And we were connected to other telescopes around the world so that we can make an even bigger telescope, right? Telescope the size of the Earth, right? We had other antennas in Hawaii, in Spain, in the South Pole, and in the US. But it was really ALMA that gave it the extra boost. You can see it at the bottom. What I'm showing here on the left is the image that you already saw, that is using all the antennas. And the right one is if you don't include ALMA. So if you don't include ALMA in the image combination, you don't get to see the black hole, right? And we're really, at this moment, we're working in more observations, and so you'll see more of this in the press in the coming months or years. Another thing we wanted to find out with ALMA, not only black holes, is how planets are formed, right? And when planets are formed, and how plausible it is that planets similar to Earth will be formed. And this is what you see here, how we think that stars and planets are formed. They form from clouds of gas. This is number one. They collapse gravitationally to the center, where a singularity is formed, and it starts to gather more and more and more and more mass, and that is going to become the star at the very center. At some point, that cloud will flatten, like you see in 3, into a disk that continues to rotate around the star, that continues to feed the star, but also starts forming planets. And eventually, all the material from the disk will either be formed into planets or fall into the star. So that's a really nice story, but it was actually Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, in 1755, who postulated that the solar system was created somehow in this way, right? So not so much advancement. What we really want is observations to test our theory. And what you see here is a gallery of different young solar systems imaged with ALMA. So it was we really needed ALMA to be able to see how planets are formed. Each of these disks that you see here are a forming solar system by itself. Okay, they are all the size, more or less the size of our solar system. But what you can see immediately is that they are all different. I mean, they all have rings. Some of them have spirals. They seem to be sort of roundish, but ultimately, if you see detail by detail, they are all different. And this is just fantastic. It shows us that the conditions in which these planets are formed are going to determine how unique they are, just like human beings. And actually, what you see here is no more disks, are galaxies. We have taken a few steps back, and what we do with disks, are planet-forming disks, other people want to do with galaxies. We want to find out how the first galaxies emerged after the Big Bang. When, how did those stars form, how they evolved into what we know, into the universe that we know now. So you can see that we have been very busy, and there is a lot of things that can come out from our telescope, and we expect that many more will come. So that is a view of the professional observatories that we have in Chile. I think you have a rough idea of that. But because Chile is becoming a capital for astronomy, there is a lot of tourism and there's a lot of people wanting astrotourism. And this is why in the last decade, we have seen many public observatories emerge in different places of Earth. This is the Cerro Mamayuca Observatory in the La Serena region, where anybody can go, and it's open, and they have astrotourism visits where you can find out about astronomy and take a look at it, take a look at things. And this is actually the first one that I think it was inaugurated in 2000 or so. Now there are more. Some of them are private. Some of them are from the councils. But the good thing is that now there is a good market for people seeking astrotourism, because the most professional observatories are either closed or have very limited visits. We have visits at AUMA, or we had visits before the pandemic, but those were Saturdays and Sundays only, and people didn't get to go to the high side. They could only visit the base camp because of mostly liability issues. It's quite complicated going up 5,000 meters. And this is another public observatory. It's called the Southern Cross Observatory, in honor to that constellation that is always with us here in the Southern Observatory, in the Southern Hemisphere. And this is a very nice setup where they have, domes in all parts, and actually an auditorium, and an open sky auditorium, open air auditorium, where you can be, giving a lecture and actually point to the stars that you're talking about. And this is another one located in the Atacama region. This is San Pedro. This is, you can see the volcanoes that we could see from AUMA. And this is a nice one that is owned by a French amateur astronomer that knows a lot about astronomy. So if you visit San Pedro, I would recommend that you go to that one. Although I would also recommend that you take a very, very thick jacket if it's winter time, because it's going to get windy and it's going to get cold. You can see there are no walls, so you're quite exposed to the elements there. So with that, I'm going to finish the first part of the talk, where we have, I hope you have got an idea more or less of what to expect if you come to Chile, and why we think of Chile as a portal to the universe. In this last part, I'm going to talk about another thing. It's a project that we did in 2016, which is an outreach project that was motivated by this festival, the Sonar Festival, which is a festival that takes place in Barcelona, in Spain, in Catalonia. And it's been going on for almost 20 years now. And it's a festival that started with just electronic music, but now it's become a place where people from all over the world come to share, advancements in technology, innovation, and electronic music. And what happened here is that in 2016, Chile was going to host a South American version of this festival, and the organizers wanted to participate with something. The Sonar Festival is actually, all Barcelona becomes a party town for a week. You have parties and concerts all over the town, but there is also a place where there are installations like the ones you see here at the bottom right, where people show, new 3D technology, VR, virtual reality, or new machines to make music. And that's called the Sonar Plus D, okay? And we were going to host the Plus D also in Chile, and the organizers wanted that Chile would participate with something. So they thought, well, what is Chilean, very Chilean, and what is also technological? And they thought about, the skies and ALMA, because it was still is the cutting edge observatory in Chile. So they came and knocked on our door, and they asked us, well, we are organizing the thing, what can we do together? And we were like, what? And they were like, yeah, because you guys listen to the sky. And we were like, no, we don't. What do you mean you don't? Well, we don't listen, we collect light. And listening is sound. And even though both of them are waves, one is a magnetic wave, one is a mechanical wave, the other one is electromagnetic wave. So without trying to sound arrogant, we just realized that there was a big gap between the two communities. There is actually a language barrier. So we spent like about 1 hour or 2 hours just explaining what we do, what the difference is between sound and light. Light is an electromagnetic wave that carries energy and that can travel in space, in the vacuum, without the need of a medium. And that's why light from the beginning of the universe can reach us. On the other hand, sound is a mechanical wave that needs a medium to propagate itself. So the example is that if we were in the same room, my vocal cords are vibrating at the moment, and when they vibrate, they hit the molecules in the air, who in turn compress and expand until they reach your eardrum, who gets hit by that wave and translates that into sound. Okay, but if there was no air, we wouldn't be able to talk to each other. That's why we can talk. We can listen underwater, right? You can listen underwater, or you can listen through a rock, right? But you wouldn't be able to talk in the vacuum of space. So I went home a little saddened that day, because I thought, well, it would be really cool to do something with these guys, and it seems like our scientific framework is hampering us from doing that. So I thought a lot, and I came up with this idea, which was to use the analogy between electromagnetic waves and mechanical waves to try to make sound from what we get from ALMA. So what is that we get from ALMA? We get nice images. You saw that already. The light comes from the space, hits the antenna, where it's transformed from an analog signal into a digital signal that can be transmitted through cable to the main computer, which is on the top right. And all antennas do that. And from that, we can make images, but we can also make what you see in the bottom, which is a spectrum. And what is a spectrum? Spectrum is how much light there is as function of frequency. So you can see here on the top, you can see this line, and the line is flat, means there is nothing, and then you hit one frequency, you have a peak, or it means that there is something emitting at that specific frequency. And then you move, so each of those peaks correspond to something emitting at that specific frequency. And what is that emitting at that specific frequency? It's usually a chemical component. So for instance, hydrogen, as you can see here, the first one emits these 3 lines, okay? And those lines are at a very specific frequency that you can actually derive from theory. Einstein theory will predict at which frequency each molecule, in quantum mechanics will tell you at which frequency each chemical element will emit. so that's the way that we can tell what is the sun is made of, because the sun, if you study the spectrum of the sun does have these lines, and that tells us what the sun is made of. And this is a photo of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? At the bottom, you can see that the electromagnetic spectrum, or light in general, goes from radio to gamma rays. And what we see, where the rainbow is just a very tiny fraction of it. And ALMA, what ALMA does is that it studies this range that is called the submillimeter and millimeter range, where most big molecules emit, okay? So each of those lines, when we study any object from the sky with ALMA, any line detection means a molecule or chemical element is present in that object. And that is the way we make astrochemistry. That's the way we can tell what the universe is made of, by identifying each of those lines and telling which chemical element or molecule it corresponds to. So as I said, we can know what each line is, or which chemical element it corresponds to, by theory, or also by experiments. What this guy is doing is he's putting some molecule inside the machine, and it's going to get bombarded with photons, the particles of light, so that it will the element that he put inside in that cap chamber is going to emit light, and they can tell what the spectrum of that compound looks like. So that's what these guys are doing. They bombarded that thing with light, and they're seeing the spectrum of that thing. So with that laboratory spectrum, we can go and compare it to the spectrum from the astronomical object that we're seeing, and that is the way that we can tell what are things made of. So ALMA, for being so big and actually so cutting edge technology, can receive very rich spectrums. It has a very, very low noise level, so you can see all these, we call them weeds, you know, the bottom, the tiny lines, because these are tiny, these are other molecules that we couldn't see with other telescopes, and they are hard to identify because sometimes they blend. But in this image, you can see that at least the brightest lines are all very well identified, and you can see on the right, for instance, we're seeing things like water and carbon monoxide, which are, as we know, crucial for life on Earth. One of the big discoveries that we did at the beginning was the discovery of glycoaldehyde in a star-forming cloud. And glycoaldehyde is a type of sugar that is kind of poisonous for us, so we shouldn't eat that, but it's actually part of the DNA replication process. So it's actually a molecule that is crucial for the sustainability of life on Earth, in all living organisms on Earth. So the discovery of this type of compound on star-forming regions is really telling us that the building blocks of life are ubiquitous around these star-forming regions. And actually, just last year, there was a big fuss in the press because ALMA had supposedly detected phosphine in Venus. And phosphine is another compound, but that on Earth is only produced by some type of bacteria. So the detection of phosphine in Venus was supposedly an indication that there could be some type of life producing phosphine in Venus. Unfortunately, or thankfully, other groups from other places got the data, because the ALMA data becomes public after a year, and reprocessed the data and were unable to confirm the detection. So it actually turned out that the detection of phosphine in Venus was bogus. But that's good. I mean, that's how we work, right? We should not take things for granted, and it's very important to be able to reproduce the results before claiming a big discovery as this one. And why am I telling you all about this? Is because the spectrum that we see, that you already understand means molecules, is analogous to the spectrum of sound. I mean, if some of you are old enough like me to know what the image on the bottom left means, and for those who don't, that is what we call an equalizer. This is what hi-fi stereo equipment used to bring. And what you see on the left, those little lights are actually how much of each frequency the music you're listening carries. On the right, you have the basses, you know, the very long wavelet sounds like boom, boom, boom. In the middle, you have the mids, and you have the highs on the right. So with the controls on the right, one could change how much of one sound you wanted to listen. So you could actually turn down completely the bass to highlight the highs if you wanted to listen, you know, to a violin solo inside a symphony. But the thing is that there is this analogy between the spectrum of sound and the spectrum of light. Actually, each note, each pure note, each tone is a sound line, if you want, right? At the bottom here, we have frequency in hertz, and you can see that G4, for instance, peaks at the frequency of 392 hertz, right? And each of those tones that you can see in the chart on the top has its very specific frequency. So the idea I came out with that night is that why don't we play the sound, the spectrums from these clouds that we're studying? So what we did, together with my very distinguished colleague and friend, Ricardo Finger, who's a doctor in electrical engineering and works in radio astronomy, making radio astronomy instrumentation at the Universidad de Chile, and is also a musician, and he's also a Boy Scout, and he's also a great person. We work in developing a little algorithm that would identify the spectral lines in the ALMA spectrum and attribute a note to it, okay? So we would say, okay, this is the first line, and we're gonna say this line is a, let's say an A that has a frequency of 440 kilohertz, okay? So that's the only thing we would do. We would identify only one line and give it one frequency, but the second would just be what it corresponds to, given that this one, the first one was 440, okay? And we would respect the relative frequencies and the relative amplitudes of those lines when synthesizing the sounds. So that the only arbitrary thing we did was the first correspondence from sound to light. The rest will be automatically done. It would be respecting the chord coming from space. So prepare your ears, because these are not pretty, okay? This is what came out of processing different parts of the spectrum. The spectrum that you see here is a spectrum that came from the Orion Nebula, which is a very rich star-forming region and has a lot of molecules, as you can see. And what we did, I thought I had it sound. What we did is that we created a sound bank from this process. We made several little snippets of sound that we put together into a sound bank, and that we made it freely available so that electronic music producers could actually make music from these sounds. And we made it public right at the moment of the Sonar Plus D festival, and we sent it also to different producers around the world so that they could actually send us their work and show it at the Sonar Plus D. The reception from the press and the community was overwhelming. We had several artists that wanted to participate. We had, press all over the world, including Billboard magazine. There was even a vinyl record produced with 3 of the songs that were sent by the different musicians. And even this maker of electronic music machines, they contacted us because they wanted to put our sound bank inside one of their synthesizing machines. So that's actually me playing with that, the photo, playing with that drum machine that Arturia made. So with that, I think I'm going to move to different presentations where I have the music, because I want to share it. I think we may have another minute or so. It's right in the hour. But I think it's important that you listen to what it looks like. Okay, so this one should work. And now prepare your ears, because it's not pretty. This is what it sounds like. Each of those pure tones. It's not so far, not so impressive, right? Right, so you got an idea of how ugly they sound, right? And really, it's what I want to show you here is that these music producers, you can give them a rock and they give you back a diamond, right? Because these guys are experts of processing sound and making milk out of stone. So this first one is from a Chilean producer. His name is DJ Raf, and I'm gonna shut up for a minute. Let you enjoy what he wanted to share with us. So I think it's really nice in this piece how DJ Raf managed to capture, you know, the mystery of the unknown, which is part of what inspires us every day. So this was an interesting piece with some beats on the back, you know, and this is, I mean, this is more or less what one would expect from an electronic music producer, right? With their own, of course, their own signature sounds. But serendipitously, I came across a pianist in a birthday party who told me that he had downloaded Soundbank and he had done something with it. And I said, please send it to me. I remember it was during autumn, so it's the leaves were falling, and it was a rainy autumn day when I got his music, and this is what he sent me. When I received that day, I was actually in awe. I was impressed. I felt, you know, I think he managed to capture this romanticism of the work, the quest that we're taking on, trying to understand what lies out there. It's actually what makes us get up of bed every day. It was really beautiful how he was able to speak for us. I think this is one of the main takeaway points from this project, that the collaboration, art and science can potentiate both communities, because art is obviously a great provocateur, but it also can communicate what we astronomers may not be so good at. So with that, I'm going to stop and open the room for questions.
Wow, that was beautiful. That was really beautiful. I'm curious. Well, let's see, Victoria, do we have questions from the audience before I express a couple of my own?
Not yet.
Okay. So I know that you've mentioned this now peripherally, but I would love to know what is your relationship with the indigenous people in the regions of the observatories? And are there living languages there or not? Do they still have their language?
Very few elders still speak Kunsa. As in many parts of the Americas, indigenous people had a tough life and a tough time trying to survive and keep their languages and their culture in spite of progress. But I would say that by 1975, most people living in San Pedro de Atacama didn't have an ID card. The progress had not reached that place. And at that time, there was there is a museum there that was put together by a missionary, and where he gathered a lot of archaeological material. And yes, there are still communities living there. Alma has a strong community program with them. We support them financially. We have educational interchanges with them. We support the local craftsmen. I just ordered myself for giving to some of the people that participate in an educational program that I run. We ordered 10 rock antennas that the craftsman from one of the villages around the observatory, he made them out of rock. So in order to support them, we ordered, and actually they're really pretty. We have had conversations, round tables. There is a TV show going around that they show up from time to time in the national TV here in Chile, where I sat down with an elder. It was actually a blind elder, and he was telling me about their cosmogonies, their vision of the creation of the universe. And I was trying to engage in a dialogue with him and see the similarities that we have in common. So there are still communities, but to answer your question, the language is about to disappear in a couple of generations, unfortunately.
I see. But you have a good relationship, and I like to hear about that collaboration. That's great. That's really great.
Yeah, the EPO team, the Educational and Public Outreach team that we have a strong program and have had this since the beginning.
Yes, very good.
So
very good.
We are perceived. I want to believe that we are perceived as less harmful than all the mining companies that are around, because those mining companies are the ones that are really exploiting the natural resources and the water in the region without any considerations.
I see. Right. Do you have a baby project that you're excited about right now?
Yes. Yeah. So many things I would like to do. I love outreach myself. I think it's our duty to do outreach. It's not something that we should do as a side project. I mean, especially because most of these telescopes are paid with taxpayers' money. I mean, you are financing part of ALMA. North America is paying for 35% of it. The rest is European governments. The rest is Asian governments. So it's very important that everybody knows what we're doing. Some people ask me, hey, do you talk to aliens, but you cannot tell me? No, man, if we discover aliens, you would be the first person to know, because we need to justify it. Okay, so it's very important for me to engage the community in what we do, not only because they maintain us, but because I profoundly think that the society that looks more up to the sky is a more conscious society, and hence is a better society that is better prepared for the challenges that lie in front of us.
Mm. That's a beautiful
So
thought.
I didn't answer your question. The project itself, yeah, I'm talking with an architect friend and another astronomer in how we can make an installation that will show parts of the Milky Way in real 3D, right? Something you can actually walk through and see the Orion Nebula in distance and walking through it. So we're still thinking on how to put that together. So I did my part. I collected the data and we're working on it. But the new position I took on March, and this managerial position is really taking it on the free time that I have.
Which you didn't have much, I'm sure.
I'm in vacations right now, but I'm really enjoy talking to you, Jean, and I hope the audience would also enjoy what I shared with you today.
I know people love to hear astronomers talk about their work, but also about their play. So you told us before we went live that you had the opportunity to visit one of the tributaries of the Amazon, not in mosquito season. Tell us a little bit about that.
My mother is Brazilian, my father is Chilean, so I have this Brazilian connection, and I've come to Brazil since I was a kid, and this was the first time I was able to get into a plane after the pandemic. I used to travel every month, get up on a plane, and now it's been 2 years, and the first plane I took was to come here and visit my family. But I also needed some time off, from big cities and all that. And I just heard about this place in the middle of the Amazon that in the dry season, because the water levels go down so much, it exposes these beautiful sand beaches in the middle of the Amazon that you wouldn't think of. They call it the Amazonic Caribbean. And this tributary I was telling you about is actually blue water, it's clear water. It's not like the Amazon that becomes murky because it brings all these sediments from Peru, from the mountains of Peru. So you can actually see the encounter of the two waters. So you see this blue water coming with the Amazons. So if you go up this tributary, you will find indigenous communities that are living in a reserve. And I spent last weekend with them, sleeping in a hammock with a mosquito net and chasing out tarantulas
For some people, that doesn't sound, the tarantula part, not so much, but I'm so glad that you had such a great adventure. That really does sound like a great
Sunday,
adventure.
I woke up to the sound of the howling monkeys. It was 6 a.m. and I could see the sky starting to turn orange inside the jungle. It was one of the best sights I've had in my life. So I strongly recommend, if anyone wants to take an adventure, go to that place. Look up for the Amazonic Caribbean. You'll be in for a treat.
Right. Wow. Thank you. Well, this has been a lot of fun, but we are taking you away from your holiday time. So I'm wondering, Victoria, do you have any final thoughts? Other than you want to go where Antonio goes?
Yeah, other than that, like, can I visit? I have so many musical related questions. We do have a couple questions from the audience. So Greg has asked, what are the names of the amateur astronomy groups or individuals that you recommend in Atacama?
Space. It's called Space. I showed it in the slides. It's the one that is run by that French guy. That guy is no BS. He knows what he's talking about.
Just
So look for
space.
Santiago de Gama and you'll find his name. It's a French name. Alain.
And Sarah has asked, are there any fiction writers who tell especially good stories about astronomy? What a good question.
Whew, there's so many, so inspiring. I mean, well, of course, Carl Sagan, right? He writes astronomy. He wrote Cosmos, so many things about science. But I think science fiction, which I'm not a super fan, but there are so many good science fiction books that have inspired us. And I have to go to the classics like Ray Bradbury, the Martian Chronicles. I read that when I was a teenager, and it's so crazy that we're so close from it. I think we are going to see a human in Mars in the coming years. It's not going to be that long.
I guess I have a different question. Do you have a book about Chile, fiction, that you think captures something about the culture or maybe even the connection with the cosmos?
It could be a popular fiction book too.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Tina and I just like to read books. And
Yeah,
we're just looking for.
yeah. I mean,
Very
Isabel Allende is a good writer.
She's good. She does magical realism, I think. A little bit like Gabriel Garcia Marquez. But when you ask me about movies, I cannot. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is a very emotionally charged documentary that is called Light's Nostalgy, or La Nostalgia de la Luz, the nostalgia of light. And that is a book that shows the contradictions and the similarities of the astronomers looking for an answer in space and the mothers and relatives of people that were kidnapped and disappeared during the dictatorship and were somewhere buried in the same desert where we're looking for light. So it's a very, as I said, emotionally charged documentary, but everybody, I mean, you will talk about that after seeing that. You'll not be the same person after that. It's beautiful. It's beautiful and not beautiful, but that's who we are. We're a country of contradictions. We're a country of contradictions.
Yeah.
We have a comment from Sarah who says, thank you. I've recently been reading some of Italo Calvino's Cosmic Comics, which pairs perfectly with your talk.
I'm going to read that. Thank you for the recommendation. Italo Calvino, I'll read that. I'll be happy to take more questions if there are any.
I don't see any right now.
As I said, I'm starting to feel a little guilty because we are taking you away from a little bit of time, the little time that you have off with your family. I would like to thank you again, Antonio. This was a magnificent talk, wonderful balance between the discoveries that ALMA and other telescopes in Chile have made, and also how you managed to squeeze the data and get some music that inspired others as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Victoria. Again, it's my pleasure to be here with you again. And I think, I hope the audience will also enjoy what I had to share here, and I'll be happy to come back another time. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Terry, thank you. We will be back. We will tap you again. Thank you so much.
I hope we'll have new discoveries to share.
Yes. Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everybody.